A very good afternoon and welcome to this edition of the Youth Roundtable on Civic Space TV. I am Philip Molisa. On this episode, I host a very powerful panel of young people who are here to talk to me about matters the East African community. You and I, for now, know that we just celebrated the 25th anniversary of the East African community, and there is a lot to talk about in terms of why it was established and how far it has moved, but also what it has achieved and where the failures are. And these people here are here to help me in making sense of that journey of 25 years and create the linkages of what we should include in that particular journey to make sure in the next 25 there is a lot more to celebrate than to worry about or get to pan a bit about in terms of saying, no, I think we cannot achieve this, we cannot do this. I think we should even break it up because we have similar voices in the region, and we hope this will be a very, very powerful conversation. I will take the honor of having them speak to you briefly about themselves before we get into the depth of the conversation. And in this country, we dearly say ladies first. I hope and Civic Space respects ladies so much. I think I will take the honor of having the lady talk to us first.
Hello, Treslin Ahunda is my name. I am a youth leader from Busheng district. I am also a lawyer, and I'm very honored to join in the discussion today, but also to understand the different perspectives that my fellow panelists could have on the discussion. So thank you for having me, Philip.
Thank you so much, Treslin Nkunda from Busheng District. She's a lawyer, a youth leader, an activist, very many things. We're happy to have you, and we can't wait to hear your perspective on the East African community and the journey we've moved as a people of East Africa. On Tracy's left is a very powerful man. Gentlemen.
Yes, thanks Philip and the viewers. My name is Masawi Ivan. I'm a youth leader at the FDC Youth League. I'm a practicing engineer because unfortunately I started registration, so I use the word practicing. I want to appreciate Civic Space and Center for Constitutional Governance for the invite, especially on seeing that we contribute towards nation building through giving discussion to pertinent issues that concern us as Ugandans, but also a region as a bloc. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ivan Masawi. He did not mention, but the people of Bugisu, the people of Eastern Uganda know him so well, and I know he has very many conversations to talk to the grassroots, especially as we gear into 2026, and hopefully he will share with us a little later. But thank you so much for joining us, Masawi, and we can't wait to hear what you have to share about this East African journey. Gentlemen, you're welcome.
Thank you very much. Our esteemed host, that is Civic Space TV, which surely should be applauded for their endeavors and providing a platform for we, the young people, to come and speak to the issues that affect us. Our land moderator this morning, Comrade Philip Molisa. For purposes of introduction, I am Raymond Ocheng, a son, a brother, a friend, and most importantly, a Pan-Africanist. I'm a legal scholar as well, and it's really a great honor to be amongst these discussants today. And we look forward to having a fruitful one.
Thank you so much, Raymond Ocheng, Pan-Africanist, a legal scholar, very many things. We're happy to have you, and we can't wait to hear what the law says about the East African community and where we should fix in that particular sector. And last but not least,
thank you very much. It's my singular pleasure and honor getting back on this very particular platform to share my perspective alongside very distinguished panelists that I cannot wait to relearn and learn from them. For the purposes of introduction, I'm by the names of Abraham Omer, a citizen from a young district. Unlike other panelists, a medical student, but very passionate about leadership and community governance.
Thank you so much, Omer Abraham from Oyam. Wow, a medical student. So our lives are very much safe here. If you threaten them through the biology, the medics are here. If you threaten us through the legal sector,
The
we are still
conversation
here
is
for.
healthy.
And if you want to affect our roads or our building here, then certainly we have an engineer to make sure that is addressed. But also a very powerful team of people behind the machines to make sure you have us so clearly, both in video and audio. Thank you so much. Colleagues, 25 years ago, people who wished good for this region sat down from the three countries, Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania, and thought about reviving the East African community. I want to hear from you. If you were here in 1999 and someone brought an idea to you that we want to create an East African community, what would be your response and why? And I'll start with you, Ivan.
I was born by 1999.
Certainly
So I was
not,
here. Maybe I was not just, I was a young boy, a baby or a kid, but I was here in 9. So don't make 1999 look so far. We were born. Thank you, Philip. I think you used the word revive, but we need to examine the findings. Why revive? Why not start? It means they had a history of start, of initiation, of origination. I think the quickest history, I've got this when I was in Arusha, the East African Community for You Lead Summit. At least I've been there twice. I've also attended the plenary. They will run back to 1905 with the East African Currency Board coming into initiation. That is where the current history of EAC starts from, at least the one that is documented. They come to 1917, Uganda and Kenya go into a treaty of working relations within the community. Come to 1927, I think Tanzania joins. They come to 1948, I think they get the East African High Commission, which turned into EAC. I think when we look at 1967, where the current treaty you say was revived, is when it came into enactment. Under the wise Dr. Milton Obote, Julius Nyerere, and Mzee Jomo Kenyatta. If we go by that history, Amin did things happened under Amin because he abolished it in 1977. And I think is why the word revive is fit for purpose. In 1999 to revive, and it begins work in July of 2000. If you asked, first of all, its relevance, those maybe who used to sit exams of the East African High Commission under the board, those who touch the East African currency, may have a very different perspective from us, the young people. But us, the young people, given that our demands and needs have been so dynamic and so urgent, unfortunately, we even have a Ministry of East African Affairs with a full minister and an assistant. I think we would demand maybe a lot, because the key issue is what were the key objectives of the East African community. And then we need to examine narrowly to see what have been the impact, what has been the usefulness of what has been achieved in the objectives. There are certain things which may score, maybe peace and security, although we all know that what has made DRC refuse to join is issues of security with the M23, but also Ugandan generals who are stealing from DRC, because we had thieves which this country has paid for who stole in DRC. So that may have tarnished, but you can see it has also grown. From 3 countries to now having Burundi, Somalia, and Rwanda join. I think Somalia joined this year. That is a good sign of growth in terms of numbers. But my question will maybe, which my fellow panelists will help, is to audit the impact. Because when you look at trade combinations, it has not changed much. We don't have African free continental trade area policies are not being pushed. When you look at education, Kenya is implementing a different model from Uganda, who are the benchmark of the education. Kenya now reaches university at a younger age. When you hear Uganda, and most are busy repeating A level, as if A level is going to earn them employment. When you look at the handling of projects, for example, SDR, you have seen that with or without the East African community, there has not been much impact. Look at human rights. We can take the latest incident, Dr. Kano Kizavyesige's handling. Where has EAC's voice been in saying that such issues don't damage the repetition of its objectives? Because you read there the objectives and see, they were not made by drunkards. These were scholars who are sober. But if they don't achieve any, then we question the relevance of EAC, especially to us who even have a full ministry that we employ people to see that we mend relations.
Thank you, Masawi, for that rather detailed overview of the East African community, and certainly you talk about its importance in that particular line. Tresilin, 1999, if President Museveni came to you, if President Kibaki, if President Mokapa, or any other person that had the duty at the time came to you suggesting the revival of the East African community, would you agree or disagree with them, and why?
I think it is paramount that we appreciate the beauty of unity, first even from our homes, and then to the bigger picture. I would, of course, join in. When you look at the East African community, basically from the angle of social protection, because that is one of the ideas that it does intend to promote or to champion. And so for social protection, in a way that we all know that majority of the people in Africa actually poor. And in Uganda, in Kenya, and Tanzania, the population is a very young population, meaning that most of the people are us, the young people, who are the majority. And so if you talk about social protection, how best does the treaty or does the community fit in the voices of the young people? And the voices of the young people, even within their different subcategories. We have young people who are living with disabilities. We have young people who are in the formal sector. We have young people
unemployed
who
majority.
are in the informal sector. And we also have those who literally have nothing to do. So from the background that the social protection context is, how best do we put something for these young people to earn a living? But as to whether that has been achieved will be scrutinized later. So you can look at, for example, Article 120C of the East African Treaty, saying that now let us have persons with disabilities on board, because you have the East in, I think around 2014, 2012, there was a council passed for youth by the East African community. And so, but then again, is the council representative of actually the voices of the youth? To me should be the question, because we have all those structures laid out, and who actually, because it always beats my understanding that if you're to ask majority of the Ugandans, most of them are not informed. They do not know that even there is a way their voices can be aired. through those different councils. And the process is a bit bureaucratic, that for me to feel I am actually a member or I am actually represented in that council, I should either be in Arusha or I should have been to the community headquarters for me to feel alive. Honestly, even me, I used not to feel like, oh, until maybe when I went to Arusha and I'm like, oh, so you mean we are part of this, eh? You mean we are part of this? And that is a challenge, because if we are to look at progress within the young people and structures that the East African community is trying to front, then we should look at representative enough voices, but
So,
also
Tracy,
solution.
if you allow me, you see, when you talk about going to the secretariat and then getting the confidence that you're
And you
actually
get-
part
I
of
am
this
I'm saying that in a way that it has not done so much
because
to come
Uganda
out,
contributes to its
to
operation.
come out to these other communities so that people feel its existence.
Who do we blame?
I think we blame entirely the East African community leaders.
Thank you so much, Tresilin. Ocheng,
So,
25 years later, Masawi talked about what were the objectives, and we know they talk about socializing with brothers and sisters, they talk about working out the economics, they talk about working out the politics, they talk about working out the security and many other things. What would be your assessment of this journey 25 years later?
thank you very much, my land friend, Comrade Mulisa. Before we actually indulge into that, I think there are some elements we need to tackle. Most importantly, giving credit where it's due to the forefathers, people who actually saw the need to form an organization that can unite people. The East African community in its entirety is an intergovernment organization, majorly formed with the ideology of pushing an economic agenda. Whereas we shall look at the social and political aspects, but most importantly, we are looking at free trade. So, speaking about all that, we are looking at currently, we have its leader or its chairman being the current president of Kenya, that is Comrade Ruto, with utmost respect. So, away from that, Comrade Mulisa, I'm going to explain to you how this entire East African community runs. It has majorly three arms that are recognizable. We are looking at the executive, which sits in form of the summit. The summit constitutes of heads of state from the different countries that subscribe to the East African community. And then we are also looking at the legislative arm. That is the East African Legislative Assembly. It constitutes of 27 members. In that, every country, through its parliament or its legislature, elects members who go and represent them. As Uganda, we always look up to Comrade Mukasambide as someone who has really been equivocal, and he has put Uganda out there, and we are so proud of him as a nation. We are also looking at the judicial arm. The judicial arm is majorly the East African Court of Justice. It sits in the first instance, and it can also act as an appellate court. So, colleagues saying that yes, we have failed drastically is a little harsh on what is on ground now. As in my own assessment, I see there is something to celebrate, whereas it's not to perfection or pitch point or at bullseye to the objectives of the forefathers, but at least we have something to celebrate. I encourage the colleagues and the panelists, or our dear viewers, to concentrate on the positives. Which positives am I talking about? I'm looking at free movement of people. I am from a border district, Tororo to be particular, in eastern Uganda. But I easily cross the border and go to Kakamega and go to Kenya, whereby I run my day-to-day business. I can maybe buy some phones if I want to. And even, like, it's easier that way. Unlike some nations whereby there is a very strict border policy, you cannot cross unless maybe you pass through the immigration's office or that. That is aside. We are looking at exchange programs in form of academia. In that, there are several students who have benchmarking. They leave countries like Kenya and come and study in Makerere, for example. And then the same has happened. Talking of that, we even look at the sports or the cultural beat of it. I am a very passionate sportsman. and I've also had the privilege of playing for the Makerere University football team. Oftentimes, last season, we went to Jomo Kenyatta University for the East African Games. These are all initiatives that wouldn't be there if there was no East African community to start with. We are looking at the culture bit of it, in that we exchange cultures. People come from Tanzania, people come from the Congo, people come from South Sudan to attend very many cultural activities here, like the Nyege Nyege. So, yes, I acknowledge the fact that they might not have achieved 100%, but we should give credit where it's due.
Thank you so much, Ocheng. We should give credit where it's due to the East African community and the team that runs that particular institution on behalf of us, the people of East Africa. Omia, are you 25 yet?
Not yet.
Not
But
yet.
yet to reach there.
So,
The
as
golden
a
generation,
young
2000.
I want to hear your perspective on
Nikudeke
the East
ya
African
wage.
community, what it has for you and what you think the young people should use it for going forward.
Thank you very much, our dear host. Listening to my predecessors, those ones who spoke before me, it was quite amazing the different perspective in which they brought this very particular matter. As Comrade Masawe was bringing the background, drawing back to the background, I could only recap our forefathers who laid the firm foundation of this very particular East African community. That is Julius Kamaregi, and then Milton Obote, and Jomo Kenyatta. Well, much as personally, on my personal basis, with reference to your question, I might appreciate the different opportunities that are there, the scholarly exchange program, and so forth, just as the one that has been initiated under which committee? The one that has been initiated that is engaging the young people, where we have in the clubs being formed in the different institutions of learning for benchmarking, the sports arena and so forth. Personally, I can't be in position of appreciating. But a lay person, as I earlier long told you in my basic preamble, that a young man from a young district, the majority of the population, I'm not even half their representation, they're there, and they have no idea about this. They have no idea about this. For the young people to tap into this, personally, I would really think that we increase on the rate at which the information reaches to them at the grassroots. I was trying to look at the structure in which the wing through which the East African community engages the young people. That is through their National Youth Council organizational setting. But with a basic reference to Uganda, you realize that the National Youth Council is ceremonial and non-functional. I do not know whether part of our panelists here, there is one person who is part of the National Youth Council, but I can tell you,
They are all part aspirant.
they are all part aspirant. I thought they were serving this very particular tenure. But you realize that deep down in my village, there is no one knows about the National Youth Council. It's strictly a few elites. You have gone to the universities, you have been to Kampala, you have been to here, and maybe someone told them, you know what, you can come for your
Maybe how should these people get to know about the National Youth Council and indeed the East African community if they do not know?
Basically, of course, it brings back to now the question, it brings us back to the point of those ones who are extremely actively engaged in the front line. Like, for instance, the leaders. Only that you have told me that these are ex-aspirants.
They are members.
No, me
They are
I
members.
reply. I went to Arusha National Youth Council.
By
I
virtue of
respond.
being below 35 years and a youth in this country, you're a member of the National Youth Council. At least you subscribe to it. Yes. You
The
qualify.
subscription is okay. My point is those ones who are actively in the front line.
The
I mean,
leadership.
The leadership.
I will
Right away from
respond
the
to you.
national level. Down to the grassroots. They're the very one who are supposed to extend the cascade of this information to the 180s who are down there in the villages. Those ones who did not go to the secondary school, who stopped in primary school, those who did not see the primary, did not went to primary schools. They're the ones who are supposed to extend. But you realize that just as like the modus operandi of the East African community, it seems to be an engagement of the scholarly elites. Yet the majority of the citizens that we have in this country, they do not belong to that world.
Thank you, Omia, for that, and I hope there can be something done in that line. Tresilyn,
Yes.
I want to come back to you. You see, when we talk about the socialization and the culture, I look at this East African community as a group of peoples of the same origin, of the same, many of us can say a few words in Kiswahili, that is a language that unites us, but also when you listen to the Bantu, whether they're in Kenya, whether they're in Tanzania, you can get the interlinkages in there. And I normally refer to this example. Between 2005 and I think 2007, we had two brothers in this region. One was a minister for presidency in Uganda, and the other was the vice president in Kenya. Agra war in Uganda and Moda war in Kenya. And these were separated by the borders, out there, created by some people who sat somewhere very many thousands of kilometers from here. Talk to me about the socialization and the culture of the East African peoples. How deep is it? Or if it's not, what is affecting it and what do we do about it?
Okay. Before I answer that, I would like to comment on his...
He raises something very serious.
I am actually a member and a leader under the National Youth Council.
And a delegate?
I am not a delegate to the main National Youth Council. I am at the District Youth Council. And so the challenge with those structures is that they seem to be more of an election campaign vehicle than actually a representation of the young people. That when you're to campaign, because most of those structures are NRM, that when you look at 9 people, every village in this country has 9 people who are leaders in the National Youth Council structures.
And they are NRM, I want to get that clear.
She has just
all of
used the
them.
word majority, which is right.
Majority are actually NRM. But also, people get those positions in a way that I just need this position to move to the next position. I can tell you from my own testimony that starting at the village level, people did not know, young people did not know. I would go to the registrar, I get forms and start looking for people to tell them this is the National Youth Council. Please, you can contest. These are the positions. You can imagine the situation is that bad. And so again, when you go through, people think what you need to bring is money. People think that you're in government, you're getting money, so all their problems are not entirely even on advocacy, but on how do we benefit financially. And there, I think the National Youth Council has failed because sensitization is very key. The structures are very active during elections. After elections, you'll not hear about structures. You just hear about delegates who go to a conference and they want 22 million as transport refund. And that is the order of the day in, day out. So how do we actually benefit
thank you so
from
much.
that?
I don't want the National Youth Council to take us over because I know it's
yes.
I think we should find a specific time for discussions about the NYC.
And so to the social aspect of East Africa, but also entirely as Africans, I think that one thing we have not decolonized are the borders. These are borders that were just drawn by the colonialists, and because they said, Uganda passes here, Kenya passes here, Tanzania passes here, it became an issue that some people thought they were different from another. The other time we had an illustration of some of the words, I might not remember them so well. Something like an I, how I call it in my language, and maybe how someone from the East calls it in their language, and maybe how Waganda call it in their language. You realize that it is almost the same way we are trying to pronounce or to call certain things on our bodies. And so the reality is that the embracing of the African culture and Pan-Africanism and nationalism is still a struggle that we are going through, that someone will say, I must first go to Chankwanzi, to study patriotism, to study nationalism. Yes, but not entirely the concept. And also that someone who is 50 years, at 70 years, they're still going to Chankwanzi to study about nationalism, to study about patriotism, to study about Pan-Africanism, really. So if someone at 50 years who has lived this entire time, and someone who is 17, a young person, how do we, tap into the intergenerational gap and knowledge that Africa, as Uganda, is beautiful in this way. Kenya is beautiful in this way. And we are the same people. We are the same cultures. We are the same. We speak the same voice, because the ways of lifestyle are not any different. And even within the food systems, you find matoke in Uganda, you find it in Kenya, you find it in Tanzania. However, maybe the rates could be different.
You see, Tressilyn,
And
what you mentioned is very instrumental. And one time I was speaking to a very famous professor in this country, and he was telling me how he was disappointed even in how these nations got to be named. Having a country like Kenya, and it's just something out of a physical future, Mount Kenya, and they say that is Kenya. And they go to Tanzania out of then Tanganyika. They make Tanganyika. And he was telling me about the mispronunciation of Uganda from a word you all know, and many of these things. When you look at that, do you think the people of East Africa still recognize their social strata they had before this colonization came in?
I think progressively, yeah, because we have seen, like you did mention, we have seen so many culture events that bring people together, and where people pride in actually their culture. But also, we know that with the education system that we are in, culture will tell you this, and then the education system will tell you this. And so the confusion and nexus between the culture and the exposure that people have been through, but also the realities of the different perspectives. Because if for example, you're to talk about how then we did trust things like around traditional medicine, as in Ibanda, and one of the women was supposed to ask a question, and she said that you're telling us our babies should be given this kind of medicine in the hospital, but when we come home, our parents are telling us Mumujumbure, use these traditional medicine and herbs to treat the child. And so the question was, which is which? Which one works best? Is it these herbs that I get from maybe the bush, or is it the medicine that I get from the hospital? And so the clash that, because our parents actually used the same and they did survive. But now the challenge is that people are a bit confused, because some of the cultures have been either diluted, but not entirely. There are those that are actually still upholding what they do believe in their different aspects.
Thank you so much, Tressilyn. Masawi, I want you to speak to me about the politics and the transitions in that particular. When you come to Uganda, for example, since then we have General Yoweri Kaguta Museveni as our president. When you go to Kenya, they will talk to you about President Moi. Then you
before the Kenyatta, Moi,
Kibaki,
Uhuru,
Kenyatta, Ruto now. When you go to Tanzania, they will talk about Mwalimu Nyerere.
Ali Mwinyi, Rifondi Kikwete, Rifondi Mkapa, Rifondi Magufuli, Rifondi Sahara.
This transition of leadership we've had, how has it impacted the East African community, and indeed, where are we now? Is it a level to celebrate as a region? I know it's a heavy one, but quite briefly.
Yeah, our legal scholars on the panel will guide me and Abraham. That it's not that the policy framework or the drafters of the EAC agenda were lacking in substance. Even for Uganda's case, not our constitution. Our constitution is overchanged. It is the individuals who are, it is our implementation. Is why I questioned. We look at the impact, the usefulness, because policy-wise, like he has even given you the organs. He has even given you the organs. Because Uganda contributes to EAC's budget, and we have a right to seek accountability. We are continuing.
We must comment that we are
Uganda is one of the
consistent contributors to that.
And the highest contributors in some of the years has been Uganda, not even Tanzania who hosts. before I come to your question of the politics of EAC, Abraham's question is more fit for purpose, because you will not externally have an EAC when you have internal damages, internal dispensations of how things are handled in the different states. The reason we went into an EAC agenda, for example, why there was a currency board, examination board, is we wanted to harmonize, to merge up and have uniformity, because it gives a contradiction of the border. Legally, via the internal affairs, you were supposed to go with a passport or national ID and given a travel permit, or have a stamp in your passport in order to enter Kenya. That is the legal. But is it necessary if we were to go into an agenda where we find that we need to be borderless, that we still have farmers whose eggs rot from Busia at the border, sugarcane is refused. The other day Rwanda refused Uganda's tomatoes, they all got rotten from Katuna. Milk, actually for those of milk, given it is perishable, they have had to play, given also one big man also has cows. They have had to play high level end politics. So when we come to the political questions, I think part of the issues why even us we have been bound and found the same problem is that our policy makers make policies that depend, where the principle of implementation of policy changes depending on the individual available. I can give you, for example, an example of when EAC had Mukapa, Museveni, and Kibaki. The business achievements of EAC under those three leaders, if you go and audit the achievements under those three leaders, and then you look for a combination of maybe Kikwete, Museveni and Uhuru, you will see that some of our presidents came with it in part of their manifesto agenda for their countries. Then others like Uhuru came when it is not a big business. Despite that he may have influenced the coming of Somalia, given AMISOM was...
So maybe what you're telling us is the activity or inactiveness of the East African community is dependent on how much
internally. No, Philip, internally, at your charity starts at home. You can only look at even the disunity in most of our countries internally. Because you will not sell what you have not built internally. The face of the EAC should look the politics of Uganda, Kenya, but you look at the political dispensations, how Kenya elects even a president, how Uganda keeps a president in power, what is taking place in Tanzania, what is taking place in Somalia now.
When you look at
Burundi,
the current
Rwanda
situation, we seem to have a time where most of our leaders are on good terms. When you look at the relationship between President Museveni and President William Ruto and Mohammed Sheikh of Somalia and President Samia Suluhu Hassan and President Kagame and President Tshisekedi and President Salva Kiir Mayardit, they seem to be in good terms. Is it a good time for us to think most of the things we want to achieve as a community are closer to being achieved?
You see, even when Uganda and Rwanda border was locked, even when our borders here in Busia, some of the products are not being allowed to be taken to Kenya. It is not that our presidents are in good terms. They will even meet and take photos, but when traders are suffering, is why he asked a question, was National Youth Council ceremonial for fashion? It comes back to the very issue. Is East African community for fashion, or it has some impact? Because if leaders, you've seen they are at peace, but the objectives down are not in transit, there are no transactions that are giving a sense of hope. We are not seeing issues of borderless free trade area. We are not seeing issues of employment being merged to be cross-border. We are not seeing issues of national IDs being talked about, of having one East African ID, East African currency. because some of these things would raise opportunities.
Thank
on
you
the
so much, Ivan, and we're going to have more of that conversation in the next segment of the show. It is the Youth Roundtable on Civic Space TV. We're heading to a very short break, and we shall be right back.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create, and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices, and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back from that very short break. It is the Youth Roundtable on Civic Space TV. I am Philip Muniz. On this episode, we are looking at the 25 years of the East African communities and trying to take a dive into the opportunities but also the challenges that have halted progress in this region. And joining me in that conversation is Masawi Ivan, Treslin Ankunda, Raymond Ocheng, and Omia Abraham. They are telling me very interesting things about the community, and I think the people at the decision-making tables elsewhere need to listen to this and get a feel of what the young people, but also the citizens on the ground, think about this whole institution and how best it can improve its delivery to the people's now. Colleagues, we are discussing this community, and I'm coming to you, Ocheng. You see, in 2005, we instituted what they called the Customs Union, and in 2010, we came to the Common Market Protocol. Earlier, you talked about how easy you move through Tororo to Kakamega and transact in that part of the region. However, when you read the papers, when you go to the farmers on the ground, they'll tell you how often they cannot take their produce to Kenya, they cannot take their produce to Rwanda, they cannot take their produce to Tanzania, they cannot take their produce to Southern Sudan. And it is not just produce, even individuals crossing into these countries. Not long ago, the border between Uganda and Rwanda was closed for 2 years. Again, a couple of years back, the border between Uganda and Kenya was closed for 6 months. Currently, as we speak, there is almost a conflict at the Uganda-South Sudan border. And you can talk about many examples of this contradiction. We are one, but you can't come here. We are one, but you can't do this. What is the challenge, and what do we do about this?
Thank you very much. I would like to first of all start by commiserating with the Wananchi, or the farmers who have actually suffered at the expense of
the elites.
Of the elites or the presidents who have maybe their own issues. Speaking to the issue of Rwanda, there was some sort of steep or bad blood between the two at the time. But I think that has been ironed out and the border is now open and fully functional. What are the challenges? I'm looking at majorly two things. As the reason as why people cannot move freely, one, and two, they cannot actually take their produce to the market they want to access. I will speak to the issue of infrastructure. By the time the farmer moves right from the garden or where the produce is to try and cross the border and enter Kenya, for example, I'm going to talk about Tororo because I am from there. And coming from a border district, I actually know what is on ground. Most of these feeder roads that lead to the main road that automatically enters the neighboring nation of Kenya, for instance, or as a case in point now, are terrible. And in rainy seasons are impassable per se. You can load a truck with merchandise, let me say cabbage for instance, because our people grow cabbage there. Then you want to take it to Kenya, Why? Because you're looking for greener pastures. And surely in Uganda, everyone is growing cabbage. But by the time you move from your village, maybe in Kwapa, so that you connect to Malaba and enter Kenya, comrade, that vehicle will get stuck in mud. You can't move. And at the end of the day, these goods are perishable. They will go bad. But in the, also to justify that issue of not allowing everyone to access, it speaks to security concerns. At least there is an immigrations office at every border that is supposed to accredit as to whether or not you're eligible to enter that country, and if you have any ulterior motives whatsoever. Secondly, government raises its revenue through taxation as a means. So by all means, whereas you also want to make a living, government has obligations that it needs to use money to maybe make sure there are medicines in hospitals, there are roads which are constructed. So it's incumbent, you as an individual, whereas you subscribe or you're a member of the East African community, we are bound by blood and all that, and even heritage. You have to pay taxes so that the subsequent government has the capacity to actually fend for its people or run its day-to-day activities. So, Comrade Mulisa, I would also like to speak on a brighter note. We are looking at the standard gauge rail, for instance. That one speaking to infrastructure. We are looking at Kenya. Kenya has already taken strides in the right direction towards that particular move. And Uganda has also tried to emulate. Later last month, the president visited Tororo district and automatically launched the groundbreaking and official starting of the construction of the standard gauge railway to depart from the formerly meter gauge railway. The meter gauge railway is defunct, and in most places, like let me say, the bushes or the ground has covered the rails, and the roads cannot, the railways cannot be used by trains now. But what does this bring about? Way back from the colonial times, a railway system was enacted right from the border, right from Kenya or the coastline, moving up to deep into the East African community. That is, we are looking at Tanzania, we are looking at even up to Congo. But that has over time been eroded by the policies my good brother is talking about and failure in implementation. But now I see a brighter future. We are trying to make a difference now. In the near future, because they gave us around 3.5 to 4 years until the standard gauge railway is done, I am looking at a possibility whereby I can actually reside in Tororo and come to Kampala and work, then go back in the evening.
Ochen,
yes, sir.
You see, this country here and region here, we've been promised so.
The SGR started 8 years ago.
I was promised to see a specialized hospital at Lubowa 7 years ago. I don't seem to see it today. I was promised to see an airport in Hoima 8 years ago. I don't seem to see it today. I was promised to see a road that runs from Mozambique through Uganda, Kenya, Rwanda, South Sudan, Egypt in 1975.
If you were a medical intern like him, you would ask what the promises he has seen.
I know that medical interns are striking every year. I know that teachers and lecturers are striking every year. You know there is a just concluded strike at your university.
I would...
what should we base on?
Actually, advise government
in this promise now.
I would like to debunk and disassociate myself from that thinking. In that I am making a very informed statement here. As I earlier on told you, I am one of the beneficiaries, people who were, like let me say, the land which was near the railway line. People were bought off. And as I speak now, material is in place. By the time the president came later last month, that was November, okay, to start the groundbreaking and construction, there are already engineers, Chinese engineers, down in Tororo district, ready to put in the work. Oftentimes, yes, this government has failed us so much that we lose trust so easily. But there was a promise of 3.5 to 4 years program. How about we give them a benefit of doubt? And I am giving you an assurance, my good brother Philip, that I've seen the work starting. The budget has been drafted and the materials are in play. So I feel we can give them a benefit of doubt. And this starts with Uganda now, because Kenya has already done the same. So it's now in Uganda, and before you know it, Tanzania is also taking the same step. So that is uniting the entire, connecting the entire East African community.
Thank you so much. Omia, you see, we can talk about all these projects, the standard gauge railway, but I have talked to many senior colleagues, and they normally talk about the East African Airways, they talk about the East African Examinations Board, they talk about the East African University, they talk about very many East African things that existed then, and today they are non-existent, just like the railway he talks about. Why did it get covered by the soil? Didn't we have a maintenance ministry or a budget? What happened? So I want to hear from you. What is the role of young people in making sure we achieve what they are telling us, and indeed what we have doesn't get spoiled along the way?
Oh, Comrade Melissa, thank you very much for that question. But before I delve at depth into answering your question, you should appreciate the fact that in the entire East African community setting, there is a very distinct, clear-cut line between the young people and the elders who are in the front line. You realize that we encounter a scenario that even right away from the drafting of this very particular project, young people are not engaged in. Up to down to the time of implementation, they are not engaged in. Now, you asking me the role of the young people in realizing this
I
dream.
have seen some young people carrying logs on construction sites. Isn't that involvement?
That is involvement, but do you really appreciate the fact that that is the best that they could offer?
What can they offer?
So, I was still answering your question and giving you a very brief preamble onto your question in a basis that you should appreciate the fact that there is a very clear-cut line between those who are drafting these projects, the policies and so forth. As I earlier on told you that all of these drafts that are being made at the East African community are being made by scholarly elites, whereas the young people do not even come closer to that very particular caliber. They are left extremely far behind. So you realize that there is this very big gap, and now at the implementation point, you come and tell them that you people, you have a role to play. They're like, which role are we supposed to play?
You see, Omia.
Omia's argument is the young people will steal the railway line, like this one knows. They have
Best-
stolen the railway line and sold it for scrap.
No.
We are not here to hide. I come from Bugisu. I know there was a railway line in Mbale. Young people stole the railway line to sell for scrap because they are not involved in stakeholder analysis to know the value.
Honest conversation, as just Comrade Masawi has hijacked my submission. You realize that the young people do not even see the future or the merits of these very particular developmental programs that they are putting in place. Take an example of the railway line. The basic that they look at them, since they are not informed, they have no idea. They have no idea on the merits that they will benefit from this. The only thing they look at, if you get a metal bar and you go and sell it as scrap, you will get something. You'll get something. And how do you come and start convincing this person that, you know, you have a role to play? In doing this, you have a role to play.
You see, Omia, we have an educated young population. I find it contradictory.
Philip, I don't know whether you live in this country.
They don't have the knowledge. They don't have. Where is the missing link between the education and them not being aware of the significance of a railway line, the significance of working together with Kenyans, the significance of going to Kenyan university? What is the problem there?
Just before you get back to the education system, you should appreciate the loopholes that this education system is having in the very first place. And then away from that, you should realize that the literate population, or the young people in Uganda, in the entire East African community setting, they are not a representation of the greater population of the young people. The majority of them are not educated. The majority of them are not educated. Of which, now to make the matters worse, despite of the dilemma, you realize that the elites, or the educated young people, they're living in their own community. They're in their separate community. There is on the social media, in the urban centers. And these ones who are, you know, on the ground, where the implementation of all these programs are supposed to be conducted at, they have no idea. And personally, I can tell you that I do not know how many young people in your young village you have engaged them in such kind of this very particular conversation. Right away, even pertaining some of the basic activities that, you know, that has been drafted that must be implemented, like the railway line. Maybe Comrade Raymond has done so. But if that is not the case, the bitter truth that we cannot run away from, the young people will always be looking at that very short-term merit that they can get, stealing these, items and taking them away.
Thank you so much. Masao, you see, let's talk political federation. My interest as a Ugandan is waking up one morning and I can just jump on a bus, drive to Nairobi, drive to Juba, drive to Somalia, drive to Kinshasa, without being asked to produce a yellow fever tick certificate and a passport and apply for a visa and many of these things. And I assume the interest of the farmer who brings her commodities in Kalerwe is to wake up one morning and drive them to Kigali and sell them and come back in the evening. Why is it so difficult for us to achieve political federation when yet we know the interest of the people? We know these are brothers and sisters, and we know once we do this, then we are bound to prosper economically, politically, security. What is the problem?
You began by saying you as Philip, to get those benefits, pray hard that one of your panelists is the president maybe of Uganda, especially if Tracy, you'll get them easily. Then let me come to your question of political federation. First of all, we have acquired leaders in the East African community in different processes. From Museveni, had to pick a gun and go to the bush. For Kenya, they have had terms, right? For Tanzania, Nyerere had to set for them a model. When you visit Arusha, just next after EAC, you go to town, you'll find Chama Mapinduzi headquarters. They are having regional rotations. Actually, we have a Muslim, we go to a Catholic from the west, we go to in the north, gave us a candidate. Now we have gone back to their east, where Samia is from. Now I think we are political fed is Abraham's question was that internally, if there is no relevance for internal structures like National Youth Council, East African Youth Council can't be purposeful. Yes? Any regional bloc is built by the strength and capacity of its members. Not its there is nothing, it is just a dress, but the person wearing it should be the person with substance. That's where the argument is. That what have we the member states apart from paying our contributions to run EAC done to build capacity to so that if we give an example of SGR, which is a project passed in 2014 at EAC, but in Uganda it is arriving in 2024. That time lag, you know, I'm one of the person whose only agreement with Museveni, disagreement, is the time frame at which he acquires results. It's so slow, and this cheats those who exist in that particular time. We are here, we are going to die and go away. Whenever people's time is cheated, useful impact is delayed, people are taken slowly. For example, a public servant demands for a salary increase, benefits or a package or enumeration or good working relations like for 20 years. Even if he achieves in the 20 years, it will not be like the same like in a country where it took 5 years to achieve that. We know it is hard because we know being in government is not an easy task. But what Magufuli was doing in Tanzania, that model of let politics be for an election season, but past an election season, let a country have principles and alignment of doing things. But here even politics is from Monday to the other Monday, in everything. Is why you question Luvoa. So when we come to the issue of political federations, he has highlighted it well that we have not heard that Museveni is fighting with Kagame. But when the border was closed, the people suffered. We saw General Moses saying he's going to talk to his younger uncle to save Ugandans. Now what if he was not his uncle? Right? What if Kagame's RPF never started from UPM? Eh? What if you ask if Kagame is not a product of he is not an entire OB is not a product of Museveni's leadership? What would have happened? is what is happening with DRC and Rwanda with M23 allegations, to the extent that DRC has found joining EAC is not part of their agendas anymore. So the issue of political federation, even us internally here, I don't need to see her as NRM. If we are to go to AAC and materialize anything, we need to see ourselves as the responsibility and task in front of us. How best do we share our contribution to our generation that we did something impactful? So issues of political dispensations maybe have come, but even in Uganda here we had term limits. We had everything clearly streamlined by Obote here. We have just, we don't want to talk the facts that the man removed the term limits, he removed the age limits. We have just had greed, because he thought me leaving maybe another person as president, we shall lose our entitlement. Maybe me enforcing a region, because if Museveni claims Nyerere is his role model, why hasn't he enforced the issue of regional presidents that is making it a monarchy? If he believes he thinks so well for Ugandans, why doesn't he wake up and organize an election where he's not a candidate but he wants to see transitions and successors that he feels comfort with? So the issue of, and the EAC is not the only regional bloc. Even when you go to African Union, you can look at Raila Odinga's endorsements. If how at a level of regional blocs, they solve even the general leadership of the continent. But you cannot expect African Union to be strong when member states are struggling. African Union is overall strong from times of OAU in 85 up to date, when regional members are doing well economically, are doing well politically, and security-wise. The strength of regional blocs is a combination of strengths of the individual states. So the reason we have issues with EAC, we don't carry out, the only products we export is, first maybe he talked of Mbide, we exported Mbide's English to Arusha. There they were very happy, they used to enjoy such sessions. We have exported Marema Village court cases. When you enter the judicial organ, Marema Village has the highest number of court cases in the East African Court of Justice. Those are the only things we import, plus the money and the legislators, the 9 we give. But if we ask those legislators, what policy have you changed to see that we improve on, for example, the blending and bonding of, for example, young people?
Masa, we have exported actually a number of things. We have infrastructure projects going on in some of our sister nations. We have exported security to our sister nations. We have exported quite a number of things. There is a lot to talk to about that, but that's a discussion for
is why I told you there are results, but objectives are always accessible. Time is one of the constraints of assessment.
Thank you so much. Tresilin, I am back to you. One of the things the President of the Republic of Uganda keeps talking about, among others, is the fact that East Africa needs to achieve prosperity for its peoples, and the second is strategic security. In your view, what is that the East African community needs to achieve in the next 25 years, and how do we get there?
Thank you very much, Philip. My brother here talked about the issue of cross-border being an issue of how do we deal with security. And I think at a point where we are looking at integration, but also unity and community, security should not be in a way that Uganda does not trust Kenya. If Uganda does not trust Kenya, or Kenya does not trust Tanzania, then the idea of community seems to appear in a vacuum. But also the East African Community Treaty, Articles 127, 128, and 129, are looking at having an enabling environment for participation of young people, for participation of vulnerable groups in the professional sector, in the civil society, and very many other fields. I equally know that in Uganda we have so many young people running under civil societies. But the question is, are they able to, put out their issue enough, or are the civil society spaces shrinking? I also know that the aspect of professionalism and vocational institutions is one that has tried to be put up there. We have the UBTEB and other vocational and skilling centers. But again, are there jobs after the vocational centers? Do they have financial capacity to start up something? So in my view, I would think that for the young person out there, it could be a question of what challenges do we as young people go through. And it begins from a point of realizing that there is actually a problem, realizing that this is a problem. And this is not a problem because you are 13 years or because you're 15 years. This is a problem because you go to health center and you not find medicine. Today it is you, tomorrow it is your neighbor, the other day it is your friend. It is a question of you realizing that in as much as you go home and practice agriculture, the roads will not be good enough for you to transport the produces to the market. It is a question of you realizing that corruption is affecting us. And if we speak uniformly with one voice as young people, I think only then can we address the questions and challenges that we face. But if we do not actually air one voice, if we air a voice in a color form, if we air a voice in a religion form, if we air a voice in a certain culture form, then most likely we shall not make it. So I would like to say that in as much as the contributions of the young people have a lot of challenges, there is still some progress. And I think we've seen very many young people in the innovation sector. We've seen so many young people fronting climate-related issues. We've also seen young people passionate about changing the lifestyle of others. So if we can have one voice and without downplaying anyone's little contribution, we can get there.
Having one voice is a call from Tresilin Ankunda. Thank you so much, Tresilin, for that. Ocheng, going forward, what do we do as the East African community, especially at the level of the young people, to see that we achieve that you think is good for the community?
Well, I would like to first of all start by addressing directly my sister here, who says security is an issue based on trust. In the world we live in, we are living where human beings are and people have very ulterior motives. You cannot proceed in such a manner, otherwise acts of terror and lawlessness will outrun all the aspects of governance. Back to your question, my brother, I would like to make a very radical statement, and people will bear with me. The current East African community is a crude mockery of the idea or the agenda of the forefathers. What am I trying to insinuate? I will draw context from the recent abduction. I cannot even call it an arrest of Colonel Kizza Besigye in Kenya. Kenya has always been a haven for political prisoners before Ruto came in. But security operatives, these guys, Ugandan security operatives, these guys, that's Kenyans, entered Kenya, which is surely they are out of my good sister can actually speak to the issue of jurisdiction. They were not in order. Clearly there is no procedure that okays them to enter another nation and pick someone or arrest that individual. It is unthinkable. We are living in strange times. So it's incumbent that we look at where did the rain start beating us and start drifting in the right direction. And also to speak to your question, you're talking of what can we actually do to get there. We are going to dwell on the problems so that we can address them. We're looking at the problem of infrastructure. Yes, infrastructure. How are we going to deal with that? As I earlier on spoke, we are already in the right direction. We are trying to create a connection between all the different countries in the region through a standard gauge railway. How about we pick up the pace and speed that process? That is something we can do. You can look at the aspect of an open market or open borders. How about we push the idea or the ideology of forming, of getting IDs we can use as a region? That is something we can do. How about the issue of the culture bit of it? By virtue, I am telling you, my good brother, I am a Luo from Tororo and a Japadola with heritage. But the Luo in Kenya, I've had the privilege of interacting with most of them. They have my exact name, the same spelling and everything. 70 or 80% of what they say, I can actually get it. So there is still some semblance of that culture there. A Maasai of Kenya and a Maasai of Tanzania have that kind of connection in the way they dress, the way they articulate, or what they subscribe to. That Karamojong or Sabine of Uganda and the one of Kenya, there is still something we can do about that. So how about we organize cultural festivals? Something to bridge that gap. Somehow our leaders have tried so hard to divide people and burn those bridges.
Yeah, we just had the, is it
Ateka.
called ATEC?
It is still
In our
on the
country.
ended, yeah.
Combining very many cultures from Uganda, South Sudan, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Djibouti. Many people were in this country.
So my good brother and my fellow panelists here, surely I feel with implementation of what I've just suggested, we can actually get there, because it's a viable dream.
Thank you so much, Ocheng, for that. Let us look out for that, and hopefully the East African community gets to achieve that we desire for the progress of this geographical area. Omia, in your view, what are we looking for and how do we achieve it?
Basically, what we are looking for, our forefathers had laid it very concretely on the writings, on the paper, which if you read through, you feel like we're heading to something, we're heading to the nature of the region that we really wish for. Now, how do we realize this? First and foremost, it's my clarion call. All we need is a political will. To those who are wielding the power in the, in the decision making and the implementation. And then after that, we really need the civic education of the wananchis of this country. We need to bridge that gap such that in every particular agenda that they bring forward, the lay citizens feel that they are engaged, they are part of that move. In that very particular manner, it will be very easier for us to achieve. If it comes to the draft of, the direction, or the sense of the direction that we really dream of, it has already been established on the paper. If you have been reading on the paper writings of the legislation, the different policies that they have put, the different agendas that they have put forward, it's clearly stated. But what you're lacking is the political will and the engagement of the wananchis of this country. Of which, if we could implement those two, perhaps we would realize the heavens on earth that we are dreaming of as a region.
Wow. Political will and engagement of the wananchi, that's what Omia thinks is lacking for us to proceed to what he calls the heaven as a region. I don't know if we have a
Maybe
heaven
Comrade
there.
Mulisa,
Just
Comrade was talking of political will. We are looking at the legislative arm of the East African community, that is EALA. With the most, let me say, where the decision makers are more passionate about is passing the budget. That is where you see everyone is really interested or invested in. So a mindset change as well would really do us good.
Wow. Thank you. Masawi, where do we need to be and how do we get there?
First, I want to appreciate the founders of the idea. It was good. We, as their grandchildren, we appreciate for that. I think where I give Museveni credit, he has addressed the issue of security well, because he's violent, and it's common of us people with violent character to address security. He is being tough. At least he deserves credit, given he's now the grandfather of the current East African politics. So, I will not change my statement, because EAC is a reflection of its member states. If Somalia is having internal issues, it will be a reflection of East African community. My sister has raised the key issues here affecting us young people, because she's in civil society. She knows those issues will be a reflection of us in the Middle East African community. If we want to be honest with ourselves, let's begin addressing barriers. 38.7% in the recent census are between 15 to 30. But when you go to Kenya, it is not different. When you go to Tanzania, it is not different. It means if we open our borders and address issues of climate jobs, issues of free border, issues of pushing all these numbers into entrepreneurship, issues of modifying an education that addresses production, home-based factories. We had silos in Bugisu here. Actually, most of the Bagisu remained in Kenya for their own reasons that they never trusted, but today they don't regret. Most of the Bagisu, the Babukusu, they go up to Kakamega, including their speaker is a Mugisu, but they remain there and today they don't regret. Us who have remained in Uganda, we are prone to landslides, we are prone to poor roads, poverty, we score highly. When education results come out, you search for us using a torch.
So how do we solve that for the peoples of Bugisu?
So for East African community to address that, regional governments need to be accountable to their people, because you can't spend people's money on something outside, yet internally we are having issues of infrastructure, we are having issues of students in halls who are given government priority dying of hunger, making noise all over Kampala because of food flour. In this generation, someone is sleeping hungry at Makerere. So we need to first address our internal challenges, especially on social and economic factors. That is very key. Economics in every society, when we address, it saves you the time and burden for trying to linger explaining politics. The reason Donald Trump won the American election is because he would explain the economic policies he was campaigns are about promises. He would promise economic policies that were found most viable for the audience. Than Kamala Harris, who would talk policies and clean English, very organized, but when so if we addressed our economic policies on employment, on value addition, on infrastructure, I think even his request for us gathering, we always organize launch of circumcision. The Kenyans from the other side come and we open up together. But after that day, it is as if the next day there was nothing that happened because of the climate we have created.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, our time is very much fast spent. I want to just speak from you. One comment congratulating the East African community upon having met 25 years since it was re-established, reclaimed. Just congratulate the community and we can move on. I'll start with you, Tracy.
I don't know whether to copy and paste, but congratulations. We know that the struggle continues and together we can.
Thank you. Ochen.
Well, I would like to start by acknowledging we are from very far, and ours is a history of a lot of turmoil, starting from the slave trade to colonialism and all through. But there are brighter days ahead, and my advice or my word to the East Africans is that let us not lose faith in what we believe in, and in unity we stand to go far in life.
Thank you. Mia?
If we look back on 25 years of the celebration, credit must be given where it's due. Much has been achieved, but based on the presentation we have on the paper, we still have a lot to do. And that gets back to still my postulation.
Please congratulate the region.
Oh, we appreciate the region.
Thank you so much. And lastly,
I think I will congratulate the founders of the idea in 1905, is the East African Currency Board, because they give birth to all these revivals, what you're celebrating. So congratulations to East African community, but not its members, because as the members we are here, you see what we are discussing is very far disconnected
they are
from.
so mean with
So
congratulations and praise and appreciation.
to the word East African
We
community, congratulations.
We congratulate the presidents, currently 8 of them. We congratulate the secretariat and we congratulate the peoples of East Africa, and hopefully we continue to achieve in the direction we intend to go very many years from today. Masawi Ivan, thank you so much for your views and for joining the conversation today. Treslin Ankunda, thank you so much for your views and for joining the conversation today. Ocheng, thank you so much for your views and for joining the conversation today. And indeed, Omia, thank you so much for your views and for joining the conversation today. And you, our viewers, thank you so much for keeping it the Youth Roundtable on Civic Space TV. Special thanks to the technical team and special thanks to the Center for Constitutional Governance and all our partners for making sure we put this together and we achieve that we need to put to the progress of this country. From us we say good evening and may you have freedom always.